the Law can justifiably be called Crowley's Bible, since it was offered as the centerpiece of Crowleyanity and had to be taken on trust by the faithful. The basic message had the simplicity and directness of a good advertising slogan. Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity had got it all wrong. Crowleyanity was to be the religion of the New Age, with Crowley as its prophet. The central dogma of the new religion was to be complete self-fulfillment. The maxim which has become more strongly identified with Crowleyanity, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," actually comes from the writings of Rabelais, who in his turn had taken it from St. Augustine. But Crowley made one significant alteration. The original reads, "Love God and do as you will." In other words, if you love God, all your acts will serve to please him. On the other hand, says Robin Cecil,
if you subtract the phrase "love God," you are left with no will except your own, and your own will then takes advantage and exploits other people, and the religious concept disappears. Because for Crowley, religion was, if you like, the worship of Crowley. His own egoism was elevated to that of kind of monstrous idol, which other people were expected to worship.
Crowley was at this time still only in his late 20s, and decisions still had to be made as to where his destiny lay. In the event, he seems to have abandoned plans to become the greatest chess player, poet, or mountain climber of his generation, in favour of throwing in his lot with the world of magic. It's hard to know whether he genuinely thought that this was his greatest gift, or simply decided to be pragmatic by trying to shine in a field that offered very little competition. For he was clearly desperate for recognition and attention, and a place in society. He had drifted about trying to find his destiny. Now it seemed, with the revelations of the Book of the Law, he had found it.
By 1908 or 109, it had captured him. He devoted his life to this. And from this time, the way he drifted about is drifting about in a rather different way, not drifting about with different interests, but drifting about because he is possessed by the belief that he is, in a sense, moved by the gods, that he interpreted everything that happened to him as a direct relationship or a direct revelation of the gods to him. So when he met somebody in a bus, on a ship, while staying at a hotel, the man might say something, Crowley would see this other person as a messenger from the gods, not consciously so, but he believed. He drifted about as he believed the gods wished him to drift about.
A good many people were trying to establish new religious systems at this time. The theosophist Bishop Leadbeater was making his own bid for recognition. He caused Crowley, in a bad attack of pot-abusing kettle, to savage the bishop as a senile sex maniac proclaiming his catamites as the coming Christ. To Crowley, his own system of belief at least had some logical, philosophical basis. Robin Cecil.
Crowley believed that there were forces at work in the world which had not yet been detected and which were invisible and intangible. That some of these forces, quite ordinary forces like electricity, like wavelengths if you like, had been discovered recently and others would be discovered. And that the purpose was to get into touch with these forces. And there were two ways of doing this, because the forces were external, and to that extent you needed ceremonial magic as a means of getting into touch with them. But also you had to attune yourself, and the instrument for doing this was yoga. And there were therefore these two prongs, if you like, to the Crowleyan fork, the one to tackle the external world, which was magic, and the one to tackle the inner world, which was the inner discipline of yoga.
The immediate consequence of the revelation of the Book of the Law was that Crowley felt obliged to found his own occult fraternity called the AA. A magician, as one of Crowley's biographers, John Simons, has remarked, must have an order, just as a politician must have a party. In the early days at least, Crowley never had any trouble in attracting followers, and it was thus that Victor Newberg, a bright young undergraduate, became his pupil. The relationship illustrates more clearly the power that Crowley was able to exert over other people's wills. Not only did Newberg agree to participate in a new, particularly unpleasant 10-day crash course in practical magic, but was actually prepared to go on working with Crowley for 5 years afterwards. The crash course included Newberg sleeping naked for 10 nights on gorse bushes and being beaten intermittently with furze branches and stinging nettles by Crowley himself, with whom he also had sexual relations. When Newberg finally broke with Crowley, he was ritually cursed by him and suffered a nervous breakdown, which was to affect his health for the rest of his life. Clearly completely unmoved by this, Crowley then turned his mind to other forms of magic, in particular to an order called the OTO, the Order of Eastern Templars, a fraternity which taught that sexual orgasm could be used as a way of achieving the divine union. As Crowley possessed a vast and quite indiscriminate bisexual sex drive, he found this idea peculiarly attractive.
Crowley never gave any instruction in sex magic, as far as I know, except to the women with whom he slept. He never gave out this as a form of instruction, though one will find in his written works, particularly Memoirs of a Drug Addict, or frequent references to this so-called sacred act. I think probably what lay behind this idea of sex magic was the undoubted fact that the sexual energies are among the most powerful energies that the human being possesses. For example, sex energy is far more powerful in the sense of actual moving of mountains than intellectual energy. And it's a particular form of emotional energy, which undoubtedly is very forceful. And I think this is why Crowley, in trying to exercise his will and encouraging others to exercise their will, emphasized sex energy. Unfortunately, of course, there is no place in this creed for woman as anything else but a victim. And in that sense, the whole of what has sometimes been called Crowleyanity is impregnated with male chauvinism.
And male chauvinism, it must be said, of a curiously demoralizing kind. Crowley's role as the great beast demanded the constant presence of a woman prepared to be his great whore of Babylon, his ape of Thoth, or his scarlet woman. A surprising number of women volunteered to take on these unattractive and unappetizing roles, and not surprisingly, numbers of them ended up with drink problems, nervous breakdowns, and actual insanity. Yet there always seemed to be another woman ready to take on the inevitable byproducts which a relationship with Crowley always involved. These included violence, homelessness, insecurity, quite often pregnancy, and inevitable desertion, to which one can add the more positive disadvantages of a digestion ruined and a spirit humiliated by the ingestion of body substances. But male chauvinism was just one of Crowley's less attractive features to add to his general bigotry and anti-Semitism. Yet Crowley's intellectual system, his Abbey of the Will, is really no more improbable than any other religious systems thrown up by the flower-powered 60s. The trouble seems to have been that Crowley never grasped the fact that if you want to start a new religion, it is fatal to quarrel with all your followers. How on earth are you to get together a congregation, let alone staff and finance the propagation of the word? Crowley never had any trouble in attracting followers. The problem was keeping them. And after the incident at Cefalù, where Raoul Loveday, a Crowley neophyte, actually died, it became harder than ever to attract the right sort of person. Francis King.
Cefalù, as you know, was where Crowley had his abbey, which was a rather scruffy, disused farmhouse where various disciples came out to him. And it really hit the headlines when a disciple called Raoul Loveday, who got a first at Oxford, died in mysterious circumstances. Now, on to this leapt the Daily Express and John Bull. John Bull's circulation had dropped quite sharply since its founder and owner, Horatio Bottomley, had gone to prison, so it was jolly good to find a nice wicked man in the shape of Crowley. And I think what happened was that quite simply Raoul Loveday caught enteritis from drinking dirty water and died of enteritis.
That dirty water certainly can't have helped, but I suspect it was the chaser of freshly slaughtered cat's blood which ultimately did for poor Raoul.